Bizarre Reality Media. The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones. What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of conversational exploration into the fringes of social norms. I'm the one they call Shane, and today for you guys, I have Vic Cundiff from Dogman Encounters Radio, here to chat about all things Dogman, from encounters to theories, and of course, a sprinkle of Sasquatch to top it all off. But before we get into that, of course, just a couple of quick news and updates. First and foremost, I am trying to put together a Halloween special for this show / Bizarre Encounters, and what I'm going to need for that is for you guys to call in and share some of your experiences that you guys might want to share on the show. Anything paranormal, cryptid related, extraterrestrial, it doesn't matter. We'd absolutely love to hear from you guys. I wanted to put together a listener Halloween special where it's a bunch of your guys' call-ins, and it's Orin and I kind of discussing what we might possibly think that they might be, and of course throwing in some Halloween stories along the way. So hopefully I can at least get 10 of you guys to call in, leave those stories on the Bizarre Reality Hotline, and of course I will contact you and make sure it's okay that we use a recording. And if anybody wants their voice changed, anything like that, we can of course leave that stuff out too. You guys just have to let me know what exactly you want to do with it. But of course, like I said, I will contact you guys before we end up using it for the show. But if you might be interested in doing that, you guys can call the hotline, which is 313-364-1551. And you guys can call or text that 24/7. Even some text encounters, of course, if you guys don't want to call in, I can use some of those, of course, for the show too. But leading into the next point, it's going to be a Halloween special for Bizarre Inquiries. So if anybody is interested in catching that, that's going to be happening on October 2nd. Live on the Bizarre Reality Media YouTube and Twitch channels, of course. And if anybody has any questions, clips, or articles that they would like to submit for that, make sure you guys get it to us before then. But if not, we will, of course, pass them along to the next show. And continuing on, I am still doing the t-shirt / survey thing. All you guys have to do to get entered to win any t-shirt of your choice off of the Bizarre Reality merch store is go and answer a quick 8-question survey. All your guys' thoughts and opinions on the show. I just want to help the show grow and improve this year. So if you guys wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to give some authentic answers for that, I would definitely appreciate it. And all else fails, you might end up getting a free t-shirt out of it, but I'm waiting till that hits about 50. Currently it's at 16, so hopefully we can get those numbers up because I'd like to kind of wrap that up hopefully before the end of the year. But if you guys don't mind taking about a minute or two to do that, I would definitely appreciate it. And if anybody is interested in being a guest on the show, sharing their experiences or encounters, or contacting me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can email me at inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com. Or you guys can always call into the Bizarre Reality Hotline, and that number again is 313-364-1551. And if you happen to miss that, again, it is available down in the show notes. And if you guys might be interested in supporting the show, there are a handful of ways that you guys can do so. First and foremost, you guys can go and check out the Patreon with 2 tiers available, ad-free / early access and full access. And we've had a little bit of a stock up of the 0.5 episodes over there. And those aren't short episodes, they are full-length episodes. So if you guys are interested in checking those out, you guys can get those exclusively over there on the Patreon. And you won't just get this show, but you'll also get Bizarre Encounters, so a little bit more bang for your buck. And you guys can also go and check out the Bizarre Reality merch store with t-shirts starting at just $15.68 plus shipping. So not too bad considering that most shirts are about $20 now. Even when I went to JCPenney the other day, their shirts are about $18. So honestly, not too bad. And you guys can support the little guy in the process of it. And if you guys might be interested in donating to the show directly to give me some energy drinks to be able to stay up and edit these shows for you guys at night, I definitely appreciate it. And you guys can check out different ways to do that down in the show description. And last but not least, you guys can always go and check out the affiliate links with some additional discounts and credits available for you guys. And I know times are tough out there, but if you're still interested in supporting the show in other ways, you guys could definitely go and leave a review for the show on iTunes or Spotify or whatever podcatcher you happen to use. And of course, I will read on the show and give you guys a big shout out. You guys can also go and follow the show on Instagram and Facebook. You guys could always share the show word of mouth with friends, or if you think anybody might enjoy the show as a whole or any particular episodes. And you guys can always go and catch live shows on the Bizarre Reality Media YouTube and Twitch channels. And last but not least, you guys can always go and check out my other show, Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin, talking about a lot of the same stuff as this show, but doing it from a different perspective because we deep dive and we end up having conversations about it, and of course, making some jokes along the way. And every single thing I mentioned is all available down in the link tree, which is available down in that show description. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome to the show, fellow podcaster, Vic Cundiff. How's it going today, man?
Oh, it's going pretty good. I can't complain. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show after kind of seeing your multiple shows around the community. So finally nice to sit down and have a conversation with the guy behind the show.
Well, thank you. It's great having a conversation with you and to be here.
So I guess a good spot to start for anybody that may not be familiar with your podcast and what you do exactly. Why don't you give them a little bit of a background on who you are and what you do exactly?
Well, as far as the background goes, in 2007 and 2008, I was a co-host on a Sasquatch-specific podcast called Campfire Shadows with a now-deceased, unfortunately, gentleman named Shayn McMahon. And on Campfire Shadows, Shayn and I would bring on researchers, Sasquatch researchers, and talk with them about their Sasquatch-related experiences. And that's basically the gist of that show. I did that, like I said, for 2 years. And then after 2008, I took a hiatus until, well, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself here. In 2008, I think it was, some researchers, well-known Sasquatch researchers, they went on this outing. I think it was to the Land Between the Lakes area. And one of the people in their group had an encounter with a dogman, but they called it a dog-faced booger back then. I knew what a booger was. That's an appellation for it's a southern appellation for Sasquatch. But when they said dog-faced booger, it threw me for a loop. Well, after the show, I can't remember who I took this up with, but I asked them for clarity on that, and they told me that they're talking about what's called a dogman. So, yeah, the more I looked into the whole dogman phenomenon, it was pretty clear quickly that, okay, if you have an encounter with a Sasquatch that heads south, that's traumatic and you need help with, you can almost go to the corner grocery to find someone who's going to be able to help you. But if you have an encounter with one of these dogmen, where do you go? Who do you speak with to get help, to come to terms with it? So I thought, you know what, there's a real need here. Well, years later, in 2014, I spoke with my first Dogman eyewitness. I started dogmanencounters.com. And that's when the encounters, the eyewitnesses, started reaching out to me from all around the world. It wasn't like gangbusters overnight, but it didn't take long before things really had ramped up. And yeah, a year later after that, that's when I aired the first episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. And we just aired episode 601. So yeah, it's been quite the landslide of eyewitnesses that have contacted me over the years. And 4,000 eyewitnesses, Dogman eyewitnesses later, here I am.
Wow. I mean, 600 episodes, that's almost double what I got for this show. And I can only imagine how many different people you've talked to about this. I mean, it seems like with the Dogman stuff, a lot of people think it was something that's semi-recent to the community, but, you know, I've kind of been making the argument for a while, kind of like how you perfectly mentioned a little bit earlier. I think a lot of people were having these experiences prior to when the term Dogman kind of became a thing, but it was just a matter of they were calling him Sasquatch rather than Dogman because they didn't know how to differentiate what they were exactly, because a lot of these older encounters, I mean, you do hear about like elongated faces and everything in the process, but if you start dividing them up, I mean, it might be a little bit more of the aggressive encounters, which is exactly why I think it's a good thing that you do your show exactly, is because unlike Sasquatch encounters, a lot of the Dogman stuff is a lot more aggressive. So when people are talking about traumatic experiences, it seems like, getting chased out of the woods by a Dogman and having a UFO abduction are probably the most prolific ones that tend to leave sustaining trauma with the person, where they need somebody to talk with, to cope with it. And they're also harder experiences where, somebody has like a ghost experience, something like that. You can kind of tell it around a campfire. Everybody kind of says their thing, but a lot of the time you talk about, Dogman or abductions or anything that's on the farther end of the spectrum, a lot of people tune you out right away. So like you were kind of saying, it was definitely a need, and I'm glad that somebody was able to fill it. And 600 and some odd episodes later, still chugging along and still collecting these experiences.
Oh, definitely. That's the thing, though. People think what you see is what you get when it comes to that number. They think, okay, well, Vic's spoken with 600 Dogman eyewitnesses. Well, like I said earlier, the number is I'd say around 4,000 people, 4,000 Dogman eyewitnesses. A lot of the people who reach out to me, they have no interest whatsoever in coming on the show and going public with their experiences, and understandably so. There's no pressure either for them to do that. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of the things I do, a lot of the work I put in, it's all done behind the scenes. It's been for some time now. It's been to the point where I don't bat an eye if I have 3 or 4 brand new Dogman eyewitnesses contact me in one day. I've had some days where I've had as many as 7 or 8 brand new Dogman eyewitnesses contact me. People I've never heard from before in my life just reach out and submit a report, and then I heard from them. But yeah, this whole Dogman thing is so much bigger than most people, even in the cryptid community, are ever going to realize. And to touch on what you said about how back in the day, people would see a Dogman and they would mistake it for a Sasquatch for whatever reason, I guess, if they didn't get a clear look at it. Well, that goes 2 ways. Unfortunately, a lot of eyewitnesses who clearly saw a Dogman at very close range. They saw the muzzle, they saw the digitigrade stance, leg structure, they saw things, they saw a tail, they saw things that clearly point towards what they saw not being a Sasquatch. But they contact a researcher who is either a full-time Sasquatch researcher, doesn't research Dogmen, or for whatever reason, this researcher tries to convince them, no, you didn't see this crazy Dogman thing. No, you saw a Sasquatch. They try to convince them, no, you didn't see what you thought you saw. You saw a Sasquatch and you just mistook it. Well, it gets really frustrating for these people when they're of sound mind. They saw it 15 feet away in broad daylight or at nighttime with the lights on this subject. They know what they saw, but you've got this tenured researcher who's trying to rebuff them. So that really puts them off. And I can understand why. It makes it so they just want to clam up. They feel like they're not being taken seriously. And in cases like that, they're not being taken seriously. So, yeah, you'd be surprised. Some pretty well-known researchers, Sasquatch researchers, have done that. So it's just really sad. It's unfortunate.
See, that's one of those things, too, where a lot of the Sasquatch guys are extremely like flesh and blood. So when you start getting into something like Dogman, I guess you can kind of relate it to flesh and blood, but it seems to be that there's a lot of other weirdness with these things, such as people taking shots at them and the shot's not actually hitting them. So I feel like the only time you might get lucky with a Sasquatch researcher, kind of diving into that type of stuff is if you kind of get into some of the more not flesh and blood Sasquatch researchers. But I guess that kind of leads me into my next question that I was about to ask you. As far as like the Dogman stuff goes, and as far as, all the different witnesses and everything you've talked to, what do you kind of relate it towards? Do you kind of take in more of these like flesh and blood type experiences, or do you take on more experiences that seem like it's a little bit of something else?
Well, it's a mix. I mean, you get plenty of very credible eyewitnesses who report seeing things and experiencing things that point soundly towards Dogman being flesh and blood that they've encountered. And then on the other hand, there have been tons and tons of very credible eyewitnesses who've reached out to report seeing Dogmen do things that point soundly towards them being spiritual beings or supernatural beings by the things they did. There's no way that a flesh and blood creature with no special abilities could have done these things that they witnessed. So, I mean, you've got both directions here. Sometimes I I just go back and forth basically between being convinced at one time that, okay, most dogmen must be flesh and blood creatures that are out there trying to eke out a living in the woods. And then next thing you know, you're convinced that most of them must be spiritual beings from the ether. So you just go back and forth. But my main take anymore is you probably have more than one type of dogmen. You might have spiritual dogmen that are from the ether, and then you've got other dogmen that are flesh and blood with no special abilities. So I think that's probably more accurate to think of it that way.
That's definitely how I've always kind of thought of it, because it seems like there's these almost like natural seeming ones, the ones that are just like straight flesh and blood. And then there's the other ones that seem like they're more like ghostly or more paranormal, or just they got something extra weird to them. And then the third category that I'd kind of relate to seeming like a lot of these experiences tend to be is maybe something that's a little bit more, I guess, like human created, possibly. I know a lot of people talk about seeing weird dogmen near military bases. I remember hearing like one or two stories, I don't even remember what show it was on, that people claim that they'd seen them wearing like bulletproof vests, which also gets really weird. And then with a lot of the Dogman stuff, you always hear about this thing where you hear this like grinding metal sound before you end up seeing these things, or like this clanking sound. And I've kind of theorized, and I know a lot of other people have theorized, that those could potentially be some type of like underground base or something that's opening up. And then on the other side, you got people that might think it's like a portal or something opening. But either way, there has to be something that's connected with that for it to be such a prominent thing with a lot of these Dogman encounters. But like you were kind of mentioning, it seems like with a lot of this stuff, it tends to come from a lot of different places. And if you see something strange, it seems like there's probably a good possibility that there are going to be people or other things that try to recreate it, be it that they're trying to hide it behind the facade of it, or they're trying to create it for their own malicious purposes, such as, you know, the U.S. government possibly trying to create it for the sake of, you know, using it as some type of weapon. Because I've said it a million times on the show, you could potentially engineer one of these things, drop it somewhere, and nobody would have any tie back to you. And anybody that made it out of it, you know, they're not going to be talking about this Dogman encounter that took out half a military base. So it seems like the sky's only up when it comes to this stuff. And the whole animal experiments idea has been going on since back in the 1940s. So imagine where it could possibly be at today, on top of also having cloning abilities that, you know, the last time we really saw anything prolific was back in the 90s when they cloned a sheep. But imagine where it might be 30, 40 years later, on top of having the animal topic involved with it.
Oh, no doubt.
Hold on tight, guys. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to the show.
Yeah, the government really does have every advantage when it comes to its attempt to keep this whole Dogman phenomenon under wraps. I mean, if you have an encounter with one, who's going to believe you? And even if people over here who know you, even if they believe you, the general public isn't, because they've been programmed since birth to believe this is just nonsense, that we know everything out there in the woods that exists. There are no big surprises like this. So, yeah, I mean, they've got every advantage, that on top of all the resources they have. So, yeah, it's not an easy task to prove their existence. It's not. And I'll run across people from time to time who are in a position, for example, they might have dogmen living on their property or around their property, and they get an idea in their head that they want to try to prove their existence with a very convincing video of a dogman, maybe in broad daylight, at close range, for example. And then I have to try to talk them out of that, because I know if you do have impressive evidence like that, then yeah, the government's going to come down on you big time. And when I got into this, one of the first promises I made to myself is the eyewitnesses come first. If I can help protect them, I will. So I just try to do the best I can to make sure that they're aware of any dangers that might come along with doing that sort of thing, and try to talk them out of doing that. Now, on this other hand of this, I hate the idea that so many eyewitnesses who've had encounters with dogmen are laughed at by family members and friends. And in a lot of cases, if they let the cat out of the bag and tell their family members about their experience or experiences, they wind up becoming the punchline at family get-togethers, because these things aren't officially acknowledged to be extant. But on the other hand, I don't want any harm to come to them if they are in a position to get some impressive evidence. I don't want any harm to come to them because of them blindly trying to come forward with this evidence in a public way. So, yeah, it's frustrating that their existence can't be officially proven by people like that. Although anyone who thinks that an impressive video of a Dogman is going to prove their existence to the masses, they're just fooling themselves anyway. But on one hand, what I'm getting at is, on one hand, it's frustrating because of what the eyewitnesses go through, because these things are not officially recognized to be in existence. But on the other hand, I still have to try to protect these eyewitnesses who are in a position to try to get evidence like that that's really impressive and come forward with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to kind of throw it into, I feel like a lot of the time people kind of relate this whole thing to the whole werewolf folklore. So that's usually what's kind of a hard step off with a lot of people. But talk about maybe something semi-intentional. It seems like, the time the Dogman reports really started was also around the time when Hollywood is really into werewolf films. So, maybe that was something intentional, especially considering the government being somewhat entwined into this, because being from Michigan, there's a lot of the stuff that happens with the Dogman up near the Manistee. And there's that one really big encounter that happened, I think it was like 10, 15 years ago or so, where there was the trucker who was driving through, stopped to check his tires, and this thing ended up charging up at his window when he was trying to get back in his truck. He took 2 shots at it, said he saw it roll into the ditch, and then started getting, weird calls and being followed by, unmarked vehicles. So, it seems like it's one of those things that you kind of have to read between the lines, that if there's such an interest in it that the government is showing up with vehicles, but they also try to spin it off like, oh, it's just a werewolf. Like, clearly they got something going on because they're trying to redirect it into another direction. And I also kind of leading off with that one too, since you also kind of mentioned that you were trying to keep some of your lists, or some of your the people you had talked to about their encounters safe. Have any of them by chance run across any type of government intervention along the way, or had any issues before they maybe even contacted you?
I'm sure some have, but none really come to mind that stand out. So to answer your question, not that I can recall, I can't recall any definite examples of that, but
it's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I do believe it has happened, but not after coming on the show, but maybe before speaking with me about their encounters. But yeah, I can't answer that definitively. I speak with so many eyewitnesses. It's just, with respect to so many aspects of this, it's just a blur.
Well, I guess considering that you've talked to so many different witnesses, and I'm sure some of the listeners would probably like to hear some of these different experiences that you've talked about. Do you have any particular ones that have stuck out to you that seem like they're just really, really fascinating, or ones that possibly, might even kind of solidify the whole idea of Dogman in somebody's mind if they're kind of on the fence about it?
Well, understand, I mean, when you speak with so many eyewitnesses and hear the details of so many encounters, some days when you talk with 4 people, for example, about their experiences, just because 7 or 8 people contact you, that doesn't mean you have a chance to talk with that many in one day, because some of these conversations can be, it's not the norm, but sometimes the conversations will go 3-5 hours each conversation. But the one of the most prominent ones that stands out was probably my first encounter that's ever been shared with me. This was back in 2008, I guess. This guy, he lived right on the border of the Land Between the Lakes area, and he was home alone with his dog. His wife was out having a girls' night. So he lived in a 2-story house, and the way his house was set up was, or maybe is, if he still lives there, when you're at the top of the stairs to the 2nd floor, you can look straight down the stairwell across the floor of the kitchen, and then you can see the back door, which is on the back wall of the kitchen. Well, the dog he had was a pretty big one, so they had a big doggy door there. Well, that night that his wife was out having a night out with the girls, he had been alone for some time. He was upstairs just laying in bed, propped up watching TV. Well, all of a sudden, he heard this sound that didn't quite sound right. So he was just listening, and He didn't notice it again for a while, so he just dismissed it. Well, after some time, he heard that sound again. So when he heard it, he muted the TV, he said, and he's just sitting there listening, doesn't hear anything. So he just dismisses it. Okay, that's just the wind or something, my imagination. So he turns the volume back on and he's watching, and for too long he hears that sound again. So he's thinking, what in the world? So he goes ahead and pauses he muted the television, and then he got up and walked out to the top of the steps. He looks down the stairwell, and to his horror, he looks across the floor of the kitchen to where that door is on the back wall of the kitchen. And to his horror, he sees this Dogman. He didn't know what a Dogman was back then. Looked like a werewolf with its head and one of its arms through that dog door. And it was kind of banging the other shoulder, trying to get its other shoulder through so it could gain entry apparently into the house. And I don't know how many times it banged like that, trying to get through the dog door. But when it looked up and saw him, it withdrew and disappeared. I can only imagine the thoughts going through his head at the time. Well, the whole stink about that is it does make you wonder if it would have gotten into the house, especially if he wouldn't have heard it. If it gained entry into the house, especially if he didn't know it was there, although I guess it wouldn't really matter if he did know that a Dogman's in the house or not. Yeah, who knows what would have happened, what its motivations were. So that is definitely one of the creepiest encounters that's ever been shared with me.
Just to kind of extend on that, I actually talked to somebody semi-recently who takes in some Dogman encounters, and he mentioned two that he believes are both probably the same Dogman that were being encountered, because he mentioned that it was this ashy gray color with like more of like a bushy hair. And both of the encounters were these more aggressive encounters where one of them, the thing was pounding on like the back door, seeming like it was trying to gain entry into like the back door into the kitchen. And as the person realized what was happening, they took off up the stairs, heard the glass break. And as they took off upstairs, they didn't hear anything continue on past that. So it seemed like it broke entry in and then maybe noticed them and then took off. But on the second one, that seemed like it would have been, I think, a day or two after that initial encounter, there was another one where this thing actually ended up busting in through a back door, and the guy took off upstairs with his rifle, and he sat in his computer room for a few minutes, or his office for a few minutes, and he said he heard a bunch of rustling around downstairs, and then this thing took off. So that's kind of the hard question, is you'd assume that the interest in these things would be to attack people, especially with the whole Land Between the Lakes experience where, I know that one's kind of up in the air as far as what really happened, but as far as a lot of people have related to, the assumption is that it was a Dogman attack. But it seems like with a handful of the encounters that I've talked to lately, I don't even know if their interest is necessarily even attacking the person. Like, it seems like maybe they just have an interest in an obstacle being in there, or maybe somebody with a dog, possibly, that it has interest in the dog to show it's like an alpha or something. But like, these things are so hard to place, because you would assume if it goes into the house, the first instinct would be that it would go upstairs. So why did it not go upstairs? Why did it just bang around and then take off? Like, these things have some type of intelligence to them. So I'm sure that if this thing is somewhat close to a dog and it has the ability to smell things out or even sense its surroundings around it, like nobody's really going to be able to make it away from this thing if it is really that determined to get them.
Oh, definitely. And that's one of the things I share with eyewitnesses, just to help them come to terms with their experiences if they're traumatized by the encounters they've had, is the fact that the abilities these things have are so far above and beyond your own in the woods or wherever you encounter them, physical abilities, and in some ways are mental abilities, that you're not going to get away from a Dogman that really wants to get you. If I had a nickel for every time I spoke with an eyewitness who was caught dead nuts to rights by a Dogman, but they were able to leave the situation without a scratch, without a single hair in their heads being harmed, I'd be a rich man. Well, if these things, they really wanted to get them, that could never happen. It's the same. I used an example. I just basically say if the best high school football team in the country played the Kansas City Chiefs 100 times in varying conditions, some games in the snow and nasty blizzards and rainstorms and blazing heat on sunny days, you name the condition, if the Chiefs played the best high school football team 100 times, you know that 100 out of 100 times the Chiefs would win. And that's because of how much more capable they are. Well, the same thing holds true with dogmen. You're not going to outrun a dogman. You're not going to be able to evade a dogman. It can track you through the woods like it's going out of style if you get out of its sight. I mean, it has so many advantages. You are not going to get away from a dogman that's got it in for you. But I've spoken with so many eyewitnesses over the years who they did, quote unquote, get away from the dogman they encountered. In their minds, they see it as getting away, but when it boils down to it, they were allowed to leave. That's because after speaking with so many eyewitnesses, it's perfectly clear to me that in almost every case, dogmen, they don't want to harm the eyewitnesses they encounter, that they enforce encounters to happen with. They just want to traumatize you to within an inch of your life. And then once they can see that's happened, once they can see that's been accomplished, well, I got what I wanted, move on. So that would explain the guy in the house that heard the dogman break in, how he never came to harm. It's because the dogman didn't want to hurt him. It probably did that just to get a rise out of him. The way so many of the dogmen I talk with eyewitnesses about, they do things like that make the eyewitness think that they're in all this danger, but they walk out of the experiences, like I said, without a scratch. So that right there clearly shows us that the dogman they encountered, it didn't want to harm them, or they didn't want to harm the eyewitnesses. Now, I qualify this all the time, and people still listen to me and get this wrong. When they hear me say that, they say, okay, well, Vic thinks that dogmen are safe to be around. Well, I'm never going to say that. You've got deviant dogmen out there, just like you have deviant Sasquatch, deviant camels, goats, pigs, cattle, horses, people. They're deviant examples of whatever you want to point to, a species or a critter. So why should dogmen be any different? No, I'm never going to say that dogmen are safe to be around, even a dogman that you've interacted with plenty of times. You never know, it might be having a bad day. Maybe it got up on the wrong side of the log. Maybe it's heading to the bathroom with a newspaper tucked under its arm and a roll of toilet paper in the other hand, and it bumps into you. You're in the way, you're holding it up. You never know. I mean, for whatever reason, a dogman you encounter could be dangerous. So I'm never going to say, with all that in mind, I'm never going to say that they're necessarily safe to be around.
Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break, so stay tuned. And now back to the show. I mean, just to kind of continue on that too, maybe this could possibly even show somewhat of the intelligence factor of them. I mean, you could definitely play devil's advocate and say that, you know, if they are ones that are sent from the government by, for example, just to kind of test them out, maybe they were never really intended to actually hurt anybody, but rather just see what they're capable of in the first place. But on the other side, talking about the intelligence factor, a lot of people relate this to Sasquatch, that it's not that they necessarily want to hurt anybody, they just want to get people out of the area, but they're also smart enough to know that if they draw too much attention, that they're going to have more people in the area, which is what they're trying to avoid in the first place. So maybe there's an intelligence factor with these things, just like Sasquatch, that they don't want there to be a brutal murder because they know that there's going to be a bunch more people that show up in the area. They just simply want to scare you away just so that they can have their territory. And, you know, like I said, if they attack somebody, then they're going to have a bunch of people being drawn in. But on the flip side, like you mentioned, it doesn't mean that some might not be having a bad day, or you might cross them at the wrong time, because even with Sasquatch, I mean, I'm sure that there's been a few experiences that people may not have actually lived to talk about just because they caught him on the wrong side, or maybe it was one of these rogue Sasquatches people talk about. Same thing goes for Dogman. I mean, maybe there could be just this particular bad days, or, you know, if one of them gets kicked out of the pack, if these things do have somewhat of a pack mentality, such as Sasquatch or other dogs. You know, if you got that lone wolf mentality, you're scared of the world, of course, you're going to attack whatever's in front of you because you don't know what necessarily could be a predator. So two ways of looking at it, but it could potentially even show the intelligence factor of these things.
Yeah, just might. Yeah, I'm sure as intelligent as they are, I think their intelligence might even supersede our own in some ways. But yeah, I mean, as intelligent as they are, I'm sure they do realize that if they kill a person, then yeah, the area is going to be flooded with more of these soft-skinned, two-legged creatures and all, and everything that look funny and whatnot. What reason would they have for killing a person? Unless it is a truly deviant one. Deer have to taste a lot better than humans do. And if you kill a deer, I mean, no harm is going to come to you. You're not going to have a bunch of deer showing up with guns and all this stuff and lurking in the area looking for you and all that. So it's just a lot easier when it comes to killing and being a predator, just to kill deer, for example, or other wildlife, than to actually harm a human. But yeah, like we've already been talking about, that doesn't preclude the chance that there are dangerous ones out there, which I definitely believe there are, who will kill a person if they get the opportunity. So, that's just something to keep in mind. But as far as trying to drive people off, in most cases, I don't think that's what's going on when people have dogman encounters and dogmen act the way they are, because there have been way too many instances where people weren't venturing into new territory. They were on the side of the driveway or in their backyards and in other places where it couldn't have been a case of them intruding upon a dogman's area. So that doesn't mean that's always the case. It doesn't mean that people don't sometimes intrude into their areas. But I think for the most part, I think the bulk of the time when an eyewitness has an encounter and a dogman becomes apoplectic or it's just trying to frighten them off, period, I think it's because they're trying to get a rise out of them.
I mean, even to extend on that too, I mean, it could be, again, if you're trying to somewhat relate these things possibly to dogs, which, may be right or maybe completely wrong. It may even be partially like the alpha mentality that, maybe if they show that they're the alpha and somebody backs down and they show that they're submissive to these things, maybe that's all their interest was in the first place, is they just want to know that they're the tough one, the apex predator in the area. So, just like pack mentality, they don't have an interest necessarily in killing the betas in the pack. They just want to show that they're the dominant one. And if the beta backs down, then the alpha will leave them alone and go about doing their own thing. I mean, it could easily be related to that too, possibly, because what's the next biggest thing in the area for the most part where there's a dogman around? It'd probably be a human. So they're probably always going to see a human as a threat just because it is somewhat closer to their size. But if they can scare the human and show that they're the alpha in the area, then they may not even have an interest past that.
Well, if they didn't have the confidence that they do, I could see that being the case. But I just don't see that being the case, because these things, they don't lack confidence whatsoever. They know how formidable they are. They know they could wipe us out with burning less calories than they would drinking water out of a stream. So they know there's no need to prove their dominance over us any more than you would going to a playground where they're second graders and you maybe find a kid on the playground that you want to assert your dominance. I mean, it's even more extreme than that when it comes to their abilities compared to the biggest, toughest human. So they know they don't need to prove that. They know they're in charge whenever both of us are in a particular area. So I don't think that they're trying to do that. But then again, at the same time, what are they doing? Definitely, I can't say that, because as you know, you can't think for these things any more than you can think for a person. All you can do is just guess at their motivations.
I mean, they could even simply just be doing it for fun if they, do have some type of intelligence factor to them, which they clearly tend to do. It seems like with the Sasquatch stuff, to kind of relate it again to that, a lot of like the weird noises people will hear, they'll hear like animals, they hear different birds that they know clearly aren't actually that bird and it's something else doing it off in the distance. Could be the same thing with these. If there's an intelligence factor, they got to entertain themselves somehow. And if these things have more of like the dog mentality, what's more fun than chasing something off and scaring the heck out of it? I mean, that's what dogs do anyways, right? They see something smaller, they're going to chase it off until they get their amusement out of it.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Now, if you look at their anatomy, it's clear they're a form of canid, it would appear at least. But how much of a crossover there is between them and true canines, I really don't know. As far as canines, I'm talking about true dogs, like dogs you'd have in your house. I don't think there's that much of a crossover between the two. But that's mainly because we don't know definitively what they are, what their actual makeup is genetically. But when you look at their hocks and their canid style heads and all that, that points soundly towards them being canines. But their talons on the tips of their claws and on their feet and other things, that's not a true canine quality there. So there's so many things about these guys. All we can do is just wonder about and guess.
Well, actually, I guess you probably know more about this than I would, but just kind of collecting it from a handful of different experiences that I've talked to people about and also heard on other podcasts and stuff. It seems like with Sasquatch, people talk about seeing usually a couple of them at a time. Like they tend to work as like a tribe or like a pack. But when it comes to these dogmen, personally, and again, I may be completely wrong because you've collected a lot more of this stuff than I have, but typically it seems like people don't see a group of dogmen. Usually it seems to be just one single dogman. But as an extension to that, I've heard a good handful of stories where there's a dogman and then they have like a pack of wolves or a pack of coyotes or something like that around them. So it's kind of weird that they keep other dog-like things around them. But again, I personally haven't really heard too much of them really like being together as a group, mainly just having other dogs follow them.
Oh, definitely. And that's the question I get asked a lot. Do they live in numbers? Is that the norm or the exception? And yeah, I think it's clearly the exception. And I'll tell you why. With Sasquatch, they can afford to live in numbers because they're omnivores. They can feed themselves by subsisting on so many things in their environment, not just meat, but vegetation and whatnot to get by. But if you're an obligate carnivore, the way dogmen clearly are, if you want to know what the diet of a creature is, look at the teeth. The teeth tell the whole story. Well, every single tooth in a dogman's head is always sharp. That clearly tells you that they are obligate carnivores. Dogs, though, they're omnivores. Look at their teeth. They have carnassials in the back of their mouths. Instead of looking like ours, their carnassials are molars. Their carnassials are a compromise between being set up to process meat and being set up to process vegetation, like vegetables or whatnot. So, yeah, while dogs are clearly omnivores, dogmen, they are obligate carnivores. With that in mind, that really limits their options as far as living in numbers. If they live in a certain area, for example, if you had numbers of them together, then they would blow through the resources in that given area so quick it wouldn't even be funny. I mean, think about the daily caloric requirements of a 1,000-pound dogman. I mean, they would take a lot of calories on a daily basis for it to subsist on. If you have two of them in the area together, three of them hanging out together, they would really blow through the resources. I mean, so quick it wouldn't be funny. So that right there, that's a very good reason for them to live apart for the most part. I'm not saying they don't come together from time to time, which I've spoken with credible eyewitnesses who have reported seeing them together in numbers. So I do believe they occasionally will come together, but I think that's definitely the exception rather than the norm for the aforementioned reason. I mean, you look at any large predator except for lions, but lions live in Africa, so that's a totally different ball of wax. In Africa, you've got game and resources for days and days, so they don't have to live by the crush that things over in North America, for example, would, or South America, where game isn't nearly as plentiful for large predators like dogmen. But yeah, for the reasons I just laid out, that's why I don't think it's a common thing for dogmen to come together.
I mean, when they do come together, I mean, of course, it seems like there's a handful of different animals that they seem to be solitary except for when they come together for breeding purposes. So, I mean, that could definitely possibly be why people might see clusters and even possibly have more aggressive encounters while they seem to be in clusters. But also kind of expanding a little bit on the previous idea that we were talking about, I mean, that could even possibly be a reason why these things chase off anything in the area. It's not necessarily that they see anything as like a threat, or even like you were mentioning, somebody at their house when they just happen to be passing through. It could just simply be the fact that they know that they need a large amount of food. So anything else in the area that they might see as, you know, possibly getting food away from them, they just try to scare everything off so that they can be the single apex predator in the area. It may not necessarily be the fact that they, you know that or think that a human's going to be a threat by any means, but they just know that a human goes out hunting, and when they go out hunting, then there's less deer in the area, so they might see that as a direct issue with their food source. So anytime they come across a human, they might scare them away for the sake of knowing that they need a larger food source.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That might have a big part of it.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to that deep conversation you crave. But also kind of talking about some of the experiences that you've collected or talked to people about through the years. Have you noticed anything with the Dogman / Wolfpack mentality that there might be like a correlation as to why it might happen? Because you hear about things in nature happening, such as, ravens moving around with wolves because, they'll alert them of, possibly something that they can eat in the area. They'll go and attack it. And then the crows will end up eating the leftovers that are left. Have you come across anything seemingly like this where maybe somebody had like a Dogman encounter and then later on they maybe came across like a pack of wolves eating like a half-eaten deer or something like that? Because I would assume that maybe there's some type of balance on why they would follow them, or even simply the Dogman uses them for the sake of help taking down like a deer, for example, or cornering a deer, for example, and then they do the thing where they get the majority of the meat and then whatever's left they kind of push over. So it's kind of like this mutual help. But have you come across any possible relations on why this might happen once in a while?
I haven't, but I really don't think that dogmen need wolves to help them out, coyotes, because they've been seen running with coyote packs as well too. I don't think they get anything out of having wolves or coyotes around other than just maybe company sometimes. Because they're so formidable, they don't have any trouble tracking down deer and then catching deer and dispatching them. They don't need any help to do that. So, it's not like coyotes or wolves, in my opinion, would serve any purpose like that. I think that they have to exert such little effort to feed themselves on a daily basis that when you consider how intelligent they are, and obviously the more intelligent you are, the quicker you become bored. I think they just hang out with wolves and coyote packs because of boredom. It's just something to do, to hang out with quote unquote the guys. But again, that's just a guess. We don't know for sure why they do that, but I really, for the aforementioned reason, I don't think they get any benefit out of doing that other than maybe the company from time to time. These guys have been reported as being seen running 70, 80, sometimes 90 miles per hour alongside traffic and all on the highway. I mean, they can move cartoon fast, just like Sasquatch have been reported as being seen running cartoon fast, literally a blur. Whitetails, people really overestimate the athleticism of a whitetail. Whitetails, they top out at 35 miles an hour. I can almost ride a bike as quick as a whitetail can run. Well, 35 miles per hour, if you're running on foot as a human, that's fast. But compared to something that's even remotely cartoon fast, that's just plodding along. They don't have any trouble, like I said, catching whitetails. And then once they have caught a whitetail, that's one heck of a meal right there. That's going to feed them for some time. So, that would just leave them with all sorts of free time to do something to try to tide themselves over, to occupy their minds. So that's why I came to that conclusion about why I think they might run with wolf packs and packs of coyotes, just to maybe get some stimulation and maybe entertain themselves. I don't know, but it is something where people have reported, credible eyewitnesses have reported watching them running with coyote packs and running with wolves. And then all of a sudden, just out of the blue, they reach out without any seemingly good reason. They reach out and kill the coyote that's closest to them. It just doesn't make sense, but it's been reported time after time by credible eyewitnesses. So, there are just so many strange things about these guys. It makes your head spin. Almost.
Right? It could even simply just be the fact that, maybe the wolves follow the Dogman. It's not that the Dogman wants them to follow him. They just might follow him as like scavengers, thinking that maybe they'll find some kind of scraps or something like that left. So maybe they're more of like an annoyance to the Dogman than anything, but they also, again, don't see him as a threat. So they kind of leave him alone unless they get in the way. So, also definitely a possibility. Or even talk about tricking them. If they, are the apex predators in the area, I'm sure that they probably would eat whatever's available. So, maybe they let the coyotes roam with them because all else fails, it might be another food source they can eat at the end of the day. So definitely seems like it might be a possibility.
Yeah, that might be. It just might be.
And also kind of diving into some more also kind of weird things that seem to run together. I've only talked to maybe like one or two people that have talked about having an experience where they've seen Dogman and Sasquatch together. Has this been something that you've come across semi-regularly, or does it seem like it's only like a once-in-a-while type of thing?
Yeah, very rarely will ever talk with a Dogman eyewitness who ever reported seeing a Dogman with a Sasquatch. So it seems like they do tend to mix with each other like oil and water, but there have been credible eyewitnesses who've reported seeing them together. So it seems like it doesn't happen very often, but apparently sometimes it actually does happen where they come together. Now, what the reasoning is for that, I don't know, but it seems like it does happen.
With some of those, with some of the people that you've talked to that have come across those experiences, do they mention if they saw them just kind of around each other, or if they seemed like they were like irritated with each other, or do they have any interaction with each other, or was it just simply like they saw one and then the other? Like, was there any real connections between the two?
Well, normally it's been a case of them just being seen together. Doesn't seem like anything's going on. They're just together in each other's presence. But yeah, there have been instances where it seems like there was tension. I think one or two where they're actually fighting.
I'd say that's usually what I've come across the handful of times that I've heard of these experiences. They seem like they're more irritated with each other, which would completely make sense considering that two apex predators in the area, of course, there's going to be some irritation. You know, it almost seems like it'd be kind of weird if they would cohabitate together, because that just doesn't seem very plausible to me. Because I know a lot of people have talked about this idea of like Sasquatch keeping Dogman as pets, but that always just seemed a little out there for me. But, you know, I've never experienced it firsthand, so I can't tell anybody what they've ever experienced or seen. But I don't know, it just seems like a weird theory as far as people go for possibly a relation between the two.
Yeah, I've heard that whole thing where people have claimed that Dogmen are their guard dogs, Sasquatch is guard dogs, but yeah, I don't believe that either. It just doesn't make sense. With their intelligence, I just don't see Dogmen going along with that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they both have their own intelligence factors, so why would they allow that to happen? Like, if anything, maybe just cohabitating in an area simply because there's an abundance of food possibly. But again, you get back to the size of the apex predator, and I kind of feel like the mindset would be that, you know, all this food needs to be mine, otherwise, you know, there's going to be a problem. So I still don't really feel like there would be an instance where they'd cohabitate together.
Yeah, in most cases not. I don't see the benefit in doing that.
Inquiries About Reality will return after this quick commercial break. And we are back, so let's hop right in. And I know we got about 15 minutes or so left, so I wanted to make sure that we made a little bit of time for this. You had mentioned that you yourself have had a couple of different experiences, or possible experiences, relating to Sasquatch and Dogman. So I'd like to hear these experiences if you don't mind sharing.
Just Sasquatch. The first experience, I didn't see it definitively. I didn't see it, period. But I do believe it was a case where I had a 1,000-pound Sasquatch just literally feet behind me. This was 40 to 45 years ago when I was deer hunting in the middle of absolute nowhere. Well, the story behind that is I had a neighbor who was just, so impressive when it came to the outdoors. He did everything, hunting and camping and hiking and the places he had been. I used to hang out on that man's couch so long listening to his stories or asking him to tell me stories about the places he had been and the things he had done in the woods and the wilds, that he would eventually pull out the newspaper and start reading the newspaper. That was my hint that I had obviously worn out my welcome. Well, basically, the gist of it is one day he said, "You know what, Vic, I know you love the outdoors. You love coming over here and listening to all of my stories about what I've done. Why don't you just go and get your deer hunting license so we can head out and head down to my farm opening day or the day before opening day of deer season. And then that way I'll take you out and show you the ropes and we'll see if you can bag one." So I said, "Okay, yeah, that sounds like a plan to me." So I went ahead and got my license, and then, after I had my license, before I knew it, it was the day before opening of deer season. So we headed down to his farm, and as we were heading up his lane, he had a really long lane that ran off of the road all the way back to where his farmhouse was. And it was just winding through the woods, the big woods. This was truly old growth forest. Well, we came to this area where the forest opened up, and on the right side of the road of the lane there was part of a pasture. you see the horse fence and all that, and then you can see this bay horse with its head down, just grazing. Well, he knew that I was a horse nut. And as I'm looking at this horse, he said, yeah, that's Red right there. Stay away from him. He'll kill you. Well, note taken. Don't need to tell me twice about Red. I'll stay the heck away from him. So then before too long, the woods was on both sides of the lane again, and we're driving a short distance, and then it opened up on the right side again, and there's more pasture there, more horse pasture. Well, there's another bay right there by the fence with its head down. And without saying anything, I'm just sitting there looking at it, and he just said, oh, yeah, that's so-and-so. I forgot his name. I don't remember, but he said the horse's name. He said, yeah, he's fine. If you want to pet him, that's totally fine. Okay, well, great. Maybe I'll do that then. So a short distance after that, it just opened up into this clearing where his farmhouse was and everything else. So we went ahead and parked in front of the house, and then we grabbed our stuff out and headed in. Well, it wasn't that much longer after that before it was time to go to bed. So I went up into the loft. That where I was going to sleep, and I got ready for bed. Well, I did and went to sleep. And then before too long, it was morning. It was time to get up and head downstairs, get dressed, and then head downstairs and have breakfast and get ready to head out. So we did that. Well, next thing I knew, we were heading out the door, and we walked across a clearing and then through a pasture and into the woods, the big woods. And we walked down this hollow. This area had big hollows. So we'd walk down this big hollow, down one slope and then up the other side of the hollow and up and over the crest and down another hollow and up, down, up, down. And then finally we got to this one spot halfway down this huge hollow where he said, all right, this is your spot. Set up here. Remember all the things I told you. And right before dark, I'll be hunting a few ridges over, a few hollows over. He said, right before dark, I'll come back and I'll pick you up on the way back to the house. I said, okay, fair enough. So he just headed off, and it was still about maybe 30 minutes before dawn. So it's just pitch black. So I'm just listening to him walk down the rest of the hollow that I was on, and then up the other side. And then the crunching leaves faded into nothingness. And then I had the whole joint to myself, basically, and I'm just sitting there. I can't see anything. I'm just listening to the sounds of the forest, and I'm just sitting there and waiting for the sun to come up. Well, after the sun came up, I noticed that, wow, this whole area is dead. Nothing's going on. So I'm just sitting there, and I noticed that, but I'm still doing my scans, no sudden movements, remembering what he had taught me and everything. Well, nothing was moving. Nothing was happening. I sat there until sometime after 12. I don't know if it was 12:30 or what, but I'd say it was sometime between noon and 12:30 when all of a sudden I hear this loud horse blow behind me. Was it a horse whinny or a blow? I can't remember which one it was, but I think it was a horse blow, a horse whinny behind me. Well, when I heard that whinny, it caught me out of sorts. I'm thinking, okay, well, that doesn't make sense because this slope on this huge hollow is so steep. I mean, even the craziest horse wouldn't want to try to come down here. That doesn't make sense. And then also there was so much tree trash. There's probably 12 inches of sycamore leaves and oak leaves and all that all over the place. So a horse couldn't have gotten anywhere even close without me hearing it. So it just didn't make sense for it to be a horse. Well, just not long at all after I heard that whinny, or if it was a blow, whichever one it was I heard first, I heard either a blow or another whinny, the opposite sound. Well, understand horses, they have a strange thing about their anatomy. Most people don't realize, but horses cannot breathe through their mouth. They can only breathe through their noses. That's just how they're built. Well, because of that, that's why they're so particular about their nostrils. That's why you hear them snorting all the time. Because think about it. If you could only breathe through your nose, you'd be pretty particular about keeping it clear as well. Well, if they get one crossways up there, they'll do what's called a blow. That's where they'll suck wind to totally fill their lungs and then very forcefully blow the contents of their lungs out through their nostrils. as violently as they can. And because of the ridiculously big lung volumes, if you're standing close to a horse and not expecting them to do it, it can scare you out of your boots. I mean, it's a violent concussive thing. Well, I'm sitting there, and if I heard the blow first, or if I heard the blow the second time around and heard the whinny first, when I heard that blow, it really scared the crap out of me. And understandably so, because that sound, it was coming from less than 20 feet behind me. I was leaning up against this big oak tree at the time. Well, it wasn't the biggest oak tree you'd ever seen, but it was a pretty big one. I'm leaning up against this tree, and I hear this sound behind me from so close, it just scared the dickens out of me. So I looked around the tree trunk one way, looking to see, okay, well, where's the horse? No horse. I looked around the tree trunk the other way. No horse. If there was a horse back there, I would have seen it. And there's no way a horse could have climbed the real long distance up to the crest of that hollow without me hearing it doing that, without me seeing it. By the time I looked around the tree trunk, it never could have gotten that far away from me. So there was no horse there. So from just a process of elimination, I don't see what else it could have been other than a 1,000-pound Sasquatch, because I'm a big guy, but my lungs, they're not nearly big enough to move the volume of air that I heard right behind me. And the concussion that I felt from that blow, it was the same kind of concussion that I felt from many a 1,000-pound horse that did a blow when it was right there by me. So from deductive reasoning, I really don't see what it could have been other than a 1,000-pound Sasquatch behind me.
See, that's one of those experiences that a lot of people have a hard time with just because you didn't get a visual. But one of those experiences like that, it's one of those things that through process of elimination, like there's no other explanation for it. Like, it's so hard even to like share your own experience when you didn't actually like fully see something. But again, you know in your own mind, but it's really, really hard to convince people without having a visual or a picture or something like that. But, these people such as yourselves that are familiar with the area, they know what's in the area. A lot of these hunters that have experiences like this where they know everything that's in the area. Process of elimination, again, you may not have seen anything, but it's undoubtable that there is something there that, quote, shouldn't have been there, as they would say.
Oh, no doubt. But it is. It's a lot more convenient. It's a lot easier to say, okay, well, there are no Sasquatch out there, so he must be confusing this with something else.
Yep, that's basically the cover up for most of this stuff, unfortunately, is that, most people don't actually want to hear it if you don't have some type of footprint or something like that. But, putting together all the pieces, at least, especially when a person such as yourself who has done a Sasquatch podcast and you kind of start noticing these similarities between experiences, again, you can see between the lines and you know what you're dealing with. I don't have any experiences or anything like that I'd go home about or anything, but somewhat similar to you in the sense of, I've picked up the smells, I've picked up like whooping and stuff off in the distance, but it's really, really hard when it's like you don't have the visual, because you always have this thing in your mind that it's like you want to know for sure, but you always second guess yourself, but you still can't come up with any more rational conclusion than the one you've already formulated.
Oh, definitely. And I'll never say I had a Sasquatch encounter. All I can do is tell you what I experienced, and you come to your own conclusion. I'll tell you that I think it was a Sasquatch. I can't see what else it could have been, but I'll never come forward and say that I definitively had a Sasquatch encounter.
That's kind of where I'm at with some of my experiences, because, when we first started talking, you had asked if I had any experiences or anything, and like I mentioned, nothing that I'd take home about or say it's specifically Sasquatch or anything like that. But again, still, I can't convince myself that it was anything other than what I think I experienced, just because knowing what's in the area, it just doesn't make sense with anything else. But hold on tight, guys. This is our last break, so stay tuned. And we are back to the show. So let's hop right in. I guess kind of starting to wrap up towards the end. I always like to do some words of wisdom from the guests to the listener. So if there's any words of wisdom you might want to bestow on the listeners today, what might it be?
Well, my words of wisdom would be, if you are in a situation, in a position to try to prove the existence of Sasquatch or Dogman, people have tried doing that so many times in the past and failed. If you do, try doing that and you come into the possession of evidence that's beyond a certain level of impressiveness, of credibility, I guess you could say, the government, they're going to come down on you so hard. There's just no way that you're going to be able to outmaneuver the government with all their resources and all they can do. You're only going to make things bad for yourself. So yeah, please don't fall into that trap. Please don't make that mistake. That's really the best advice I can give as far as what you're asking for.
Well, I guess a quick follow-up question before we get into the links and let everybody know where they can find your podcast. Before we started recording, you kind of mentioned that you're a bit more of a private person. That being said, of course, just out of curiosity, and you don't have to go into like the far details or anything, but just considering that you do a Dogman podcast and you dig into a lot of the stuff with Dogman, have you had any, weird experiences where people have like called you or told you to stop doing it, or any type of, for lack of a better term, possibly like government intervention caused from the show?
No, but I don't cross the line.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I know where the line is, and as long as I don't cross it, I know I'm not going to have any trouble. So, no, I've never had any trouble.
So you can talk about it all you want all day, but the problem is when you go to the area, that tends to be where people start having issues.
That's right. Yeah, talk about it ad nauseum, but yeah, when you cross that line, though, that's when the problems start.
And if anybody wanted to possibly come and listen to all of the different interviews you've done with all these different experiencers, or come and find the plethora of different podcasts that you happen to produce, where can people come and find you? Where can people share their experiences? And where can people come and find your podcasts?
Well, Dogman Encounters Radio, that's a podcast I'm known for by most people. And if you've had a Dogman encounter that you want to report to me because you either need help coming to terms with it, or maybe you want to be a guest on Dogman Encounters Radio and share it with all of my listeners, then you would just need to go to dogmanencounters.com, submit a report. If you do that, then I'll be more than happy to contact you to schedule a phone consultation, and then we can take it from there. I'll find out what your situation is, and just whatever that situation might be, we'll just take it up then. And as far as listening to Dogman Encounters, the best way to listen is via your favorite podcast app, be that iHeartRadio or Spreaker or Spotify, Podbean, you name a podcast app out there and the show is on it. But yeah, just do a search for Dogman Encounters and it'll pop up. As far as my other 3 podcasts that I produce, I've also got a new Dogman podcast called Dogman Tales. And Tales is spelled Tales, because that's in reference to the fact that Dogman Tales is a podcast with fictional Dogman stories that I've created instead of the true Dogman encounters that eyewitnesses share on Dogman Encounters Radio. If you want to listen to Dogman Tales, then yeah, just go to your favorite podcast app. Wherever you listen to podcast episodes, type in Dogman Tales, and it'll pop right up. If you've had a Sasquatch sighting that you want to come on one of my 2 Bigfoot podcasts and share with my listeners, then I'll just give you the location for one of those, and then after we talk, we can decide which one of the 2 podcasts is going to be the best fit for you. But if you go to mybigfootsighting.com, that'll be an easy way for you to submit a guest request. And if you do that, then I'll contact you to schedule a recording for a podcast episode that way. But my other podcast called Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio, I started airing episodes of that a little over 10 years ago. And like all of my episodes, all of my podcasts, I air weekly episodes. Every week, there's a new episode, at least every week. Sometimes I have 2, 3 brand new episodes for all of my shows. So if you want to listen to my podcast episodes, that's the best way to do that.
And I will make sure that I include all those links down in the show description so everybody can find them quick and easy. And I appreciate you making the time to come on the show today, man. It was definitely a fun conversation. And hopefully someday I will have an experience that I can come on and share on your show, because I do try to get out there and squatch as much as I possibly can. So maybe one day I'll have one of those firsthand encounters and I'll be able to share on your show. But for the time being, man, I appreciate the time, and I'm really looking forward to next time we get to chat.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
If anyone would like to get a hold of me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through email, which is inquiriesofallrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or through social media. Instagram and Facebook are the two that I'm most active on. Or you guys can also get a hold of me through the submission form, which is up at the top of the link tree. And the last way you guys get a hold of me is through calling or texting the Bizarre Reality Hotline. That number is 313-364-1551. And you guys can call or text that 24/7. And every single thing that I mentioned is available down in the show description and off of the link tree, which is also available down in that show description. And with that, hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Hope today's show's connected some dots in your own reality. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. Abductees taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey. With a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our Reality. So if you're interested